Hi, I'm Anthony for Sydney Backyard Veggies. We're still in the middle of winter here, last week of June. And although I'm concentrating on my winter patch at the moment, it's time for me now to start planning out my spring garden. And today I'm actually going to be starting the first of my spring seedlings. I'm going to be starting my capsicums and my eggplants. And I'm going to show you what varieties I'm growing and how I'm going to start those seedlings off. This afternoon I'm going to start my eggplant and capsicum seedlings. Now my plan for my veggie patch is that I have both my capsicums and my eggplants planted out in early September, just as the weather's starting to warm up. Now because they take so long to germinate and to grow to size that's big enough to be planted out, I need to start them now. In my experience in previous years, eggplant and capsicums can take up to 18 days to germinate. I generally don't like to transplant my seedlings into larger pots to grow them out. I prefer to grow them out in the pots that I have. So I'm looking for large cell pots, and I've got a 10 cell tray, which you can see just right there, and I've got larger 4 cell trays which I'll grow my seedlings in. Now, these are large enough to allow for a decent root ball to grow and also allow for the plants to grow. The varieties I am starting today for my eggplant is called Monasa, and this is the large eggplant variety, the large black ones. I grew this last year and it was very productive. I did plant it out in October last year, and I'm hoping if I planted it out earlier, I'm hoping to get a better crop early in the season. Now on transplant, this takes 70 days to produce, so I'll be expecting to harvest around December. And I'm looking at growing out around 10 plants, which would be sufficient for my backyard. For my capsicum variety, I'm looking at growing Harley again this year. This was a great producer, really large fruit, and I planted this out in September last year, and it produced fruit as early November. I'm going to be growing at least 10 of these plants. I'm thinking maybe 20. I've actually promised a few of my family and friends some seedlings, so I'll be looking at potentially growing 20 of these. Again, these will produce from 70 days from planting out, so I aim to get them in the ground in early September, and from then I should be harvesting at least green capsicums in that early to mid-November. When it comes to seed raising mixes, I like to use store-bought varieties, but I do look for something that's got a lot less bark content than what you'd normally get from your local nursery. This variety that I've been using for the last couple of seasons has been quite good, but I believe they've changed the recipe recently and there's a lot more bark than I would like, so I will be looking for a new mix. So what I've done is I've filled up the trays with the seed raising mix, but I don't compress the soil. Then I give it a deep water. I make sure that the seed raising mix is completely wet, and then it is ready for me to plant my seeds in. In planting my seedlings, I do like to come through and just put a little dimple in the mix, just to make sure that the seed sits in that little depression that I form in the top of the mix. And the reason why I do this is it allows me to cover it over with the vermiculite later and make sure I've got an even cover over the seeds. I like to plant one seed per cell, and these plants I don't like to overcrowd the cell, and the expectation is that I will grow the seedling out within this cell tray until transplant. I won't be potting them on to grow them out any larger. They should be ready by that early September period. And with the cell trays now, all I'm going to do now is apply a light covering of vermiculite. Now I buy this in 100-litre bags, so I've got plenty of it going around, but I also like to use this, and you'll see I'll use this on all my seedlings, even direct seeded seedlings that I plant straight out in my garden. I just find it works a lot better in my context. You could use really fine soil. I just tend to use this because it's readily available in my patch, and just a slight covering. Now it's quite light and it's quite absorbent, so what it will do is it will absorb some of that water and it will sort of firm up on the cell, so you won't need to add any additional water to hold it in place. And I find that the seedlings do come through quite easily through the vermiculite. Now that I've added the vermiculite, I don't add any more water to these seed trays. There's sufficient amount of water in here for them to germinate. The key now is to take them and put them into a warm spot. Now in my context, I do not use any heat mats. I find that if your house is heated during winter at that 22, 21, 22, 23 degree temperature range, that's sufficient for these plants to germinate. I personally have a north facing toy room where it does get quite warm during the day, and the heating at night time keeps the plants going. Okay, now I expect that the eggplant will germinate in 15 days from experience, and the capsicums will be germinated in about that 18-day period. So they will need an application of water at about that 12-day mark. And what I do there is just actually put just a tiny little bit of water from the tap straight on the soil, just to add a little bit of extra moisture to the plants. I will give you an update once they start germinating. I'm expecting them to germinate in that second week of July, and I will put up a separate post once they germinate and how I look after these seedlings to grow them out till planting. But this is the start. Really happy they're done. Gonna go put them inside now, keep them warm, and I'm hoping that I'll be reporting in 2 weeks time that I've got great germination. So I just finished off planting those spring seedlings, and I'm gonna go do a bit of work in the patch. I've still got a few hours before sunset. My plants are at that position now. My garden's at that spot now where I need to add more fertilizer, and depending on the what part of their growth cycle these plants are, I will need to add different fertilizers at different rates. I'm over here at my cabbages, and the cabbage heads are really starting to form, and at this stage I need to come through and add a high potash or high potassium fertilizer to them, just to give them that last bit of growth to really grow those heads. And I'll be applying a little bit more of dynamic lifter pellets, chicken manure pellets, because they still need a little bit more of that extra nitrogen. But if I bring you closer, I'm not sure if you can see that from behind, but it looks like a beautiful, they just look amazing, these cabbages at the moment. This variety is called green coronet, and this is my staple variety that I plant. I'll bring you closer and show you what they look like at the moment. Yeah, just bringing you in closer, and there's about 27 cabbages in this spot, and you can see their heads are starting to grow quite nicely. There's actually a few really nice heads in this lot, but I'm finding that I may have just planted them a little bit too close to each other, so you're getting small ones like this that have been slightly out competed, which is still, it's probably 2.5 weeks away from the other ones. But as I come through the patch, they just look amazing. They're various sizes, and the thing I want to do is to give them promote a little bit more space. I'm going to, like I did previously, come out and remove a lot of these external leaves, the ones that seem to be clashing into each other. Give them a little bit more space to grow and to focus on growing out the cabbage itself. One thing I have noticed on my brassicas, I'll probably bring it here, a little bit of a disease coming through, if you can just see that. Now I believe that's probably a powdery mildew of some sort. It's just a lot of the rain, but I'm hoping by clearing some of those external leaves, I might give them a bit of a chance to breathe and just try to ward off that disease. But I'm going to go and prune some of these outer leaves and then apply my fertilizer. Now I did this prune about 6 weeks ago, and I pruned out the outer leaves, and I'll put a link to the video where I did that. And I find that it doesn't really impact the growth of the plant, especially if you take out these outer leaves, which tend to not to add any value to the plant. What it does is it does take up a lot of space. Now none of these leaves will be wasted. They'll be fed to the chickens and as a part of their green feed. But the idea is just to give them a little bit more space so that you can grow into it, and also get rid of this kind of disease that you see coming through. That's about the extent of the amount of leaves I'll take off. I'll probably take off 20 to 30% of the larger leaves that are touching the floor, and that will be, I've got one more here, I might take that one off. And that's it. That's done. I'll continue on, start taking out the rest of the leaves, and I'll show you how it looks at the end. I'm going to be applying 2 types of fertilizer. First I'm going to be applying is potash. At this stage, when the heads are forming like this, potash is really important. And I'm going to be putting a small handful adjacent to each of the plants. Ideally, I will dig it in because it's quite immobile, potash or potassium. But I might come and do that a bit later. But just before it sunsets, I want to add this quickly to each of the plants. And it's just literally, I'm going to be adding a small handful, just like that, against the base of each plant. Okay. In addition to the potash, I'm going to add a handful of dynamic lifter pellets, chicken manure pellets to each of the plants. Idea is I still want to add a bit of nitrogen to them, but because they're starting to form their heads, you don't want to overdo the nitrogen. So things like blood and bone, sulfate of ammonia, that kind of fertilizer is just too late in their growing stage to add that. But a little bit of chicken manure pellets will add just enough nitrogen to keep them growing to maturity. So again, small handful adjacent to each of the plants, and then I'll call it. So I just finished applying all that fertilizer, and now it's going to come through and just clean up all that leaf matter and give it to the chickens. I am going to give the same treatment to my red cabbage, but it's just getting a bit late now, so I might do that tomorrow. But for my cabbages, I will look at potentially, now that I've got a bit of space, I might come through with the hoe and just move some of that soil just to support them up, especially the few ones at the back. They're starting to get a bit heavy and they're starting to lay over, so add a little bit of soil around the base, which should be able to keep them upright. And yeah, hopefully, like I said, I really want to start harvesting these in about 4 weeks time, so I want to clear this bed for tomatoes, so I need to start getting on top of these, but they're looking really, really good at the moment. Back out in the garden this afternoon, and as you can see, I've done the same treatment to the purple cabbages as I did to the green cabbages. I took out some of the outer leaves and I've added the fertilizer to them as well. I left a little bit more leaf matter on these plants because they are still quite small and probably couldn't handle the amount of leaves I removed from the green cabbages, but they should be fine. They will need a third application of fertilizer. That will come at a later date. What I've got to do now is I've actually got to come and fertilize some of my younger plantings, and I'm over here at the moment over at my womboks. These were planted 4 weeks ago, and actually, quite considering that they've been planted about 3-4 weeks ago in this middle of winter and it's cool soils, they are putting on a lot of growth, and I need to support that growth with a big hit of nitrogen. So for plants at this age, I like to use sulfate of ammonia or something like that. If you don't want to use that kind of fertilizer, look at something like blood and bone, more natural alternative. But I like sulfate of ammonia because it's got that high nitrogen content at 24%, and it's a really big soluble boost that really will get the nitrogen straight to those plants, and they will respond fast. And that's what you want with cabbages and leafy greens, especially these Chinese cabbage styles. They need the fertilizer fast in that early stages. So the fertilizer I'm going to be using is sulfate of ammonia. Really get that boost of nitrogen to the plants. And what I'm doing is just putting it in between the seedlings, making sure I don't actually touch the seedlings themselves. It will burn the leaves. I will go through and water this in, and that will make sure that most of these seedlings will get some of that fertilizer. So I just applied that fertilizer and watered them in. Now, you don't need to use sulfate of ammonia. In my context, I am happy, and in my garden, I'm happy to use it. If you want to go a more organic route, I would recommend that you add good heaps of chicken manure pellets, dynamic lifter, to each of the plants. You will still get the same results, but you just need a lot more of the chicken manure applied to each of the plants. Again, I'll put it in between, just leave it on the surface, and as you're irrigating, it should melt that, dissolve, and feed the plant. And while I'm working through my patch, I need to fertilize my cauliflower seedlings that I started about 2 weeks ago, and I gave an update last week. I am now adding another application of liquid fertilizer to these seedlings as well, but I'll show you how I'm applying it a little bit differently to what I did in my previous video, where I foliar fed and added the fertilizer from above. So these are the seedlings. Now they're about, I believe they're close to 2 weeks germinated now, and you can just see, I'm not sure if you can get that in the camera, the first true leaf is just starting to show. What I do here is I like to bottom water. Now, a weak solution of liquid fertilizer, high nitrogen, and I let that tray just soak in there for 10-15 minutes, and I find that's a really good way to apply the fertilizer. I find it really gets absorbed in the soil, and the plants really respond to it. So I'll leave this here now for 10 minutes or so, and then I'll empty out the tray. And one final thing I need to go and fertilize is my third planting of broccoli. Now, I haven't shown everyone an update of this yet, but I am starting to get heads showing in the plants. Broccoli heads are starting to show, so now it's another time to apply a final round of fertilizer on these plants as well. This is the third planting of broccoli, and there's 24 plants in this patch, and the variety is Aurora. And I did, in a previous video, hill the soil around these plants and added some dynamic lifter pellets. But now, to bring it closer, you can see that the heads are starting to show, which is great news. They'll be ready to harvest. I'm actually running low on broccoli at the moment in my kitchen. So when my plants are at this stage, I'm just applying a foliar feed. Again, the high nitrogen liquid fertilizer. I use the green power feed bottle, and I'll just be applying probably 2 watering cans, 9-litre watering cans, and I'll just be applying it on the leaves, and I'll be expecting to harvest these in about a week's time. So this last push of nitrogen really helps them grow. So I'm going to come through, just essentially just applying it each of the leaves, and that's the extent of the fertilizer application I need to do at this stage. Before I wrap up this video, I just want to give you an idea of what I'm going to be doing over the next few days in my patch. I'm going to be starting my next round of broccoli seedlings. I've still probably got 2 rounds worth to be planted out before the end of the season, and I want to get them started today so I can plant them out in about 4 weeks time. I will also be starting my ginger cuttings. I have been promising everyone that I'll show you how I'm going to start them, and I have to do that this week, so look out for that video. And besides that, just continue to fertilize these plants, just looking after them, making sure they're not got any insect pressure or any pests attacking them. I had a really good idea. In my previous video, I was complaining about my trellising for my peas. This pea variety is called telephone, and it just gets too tall, and I had a great suggestion. Someone had a great suggestion to put some PVC pipes on top of those star pickets. Now, I didn't have any, so I've decided to go through instead and get some timbers, and as you can see, I've actually latched it to the stake using cable ties, and it's been working quite well. Still holding up those peas. I might need to put a few more string lines across there to hold up those peas. I might just do that now. And also a quick update on my egg production. Just a few weeks ago, I found that my chickens were in the eggs so much so that I was getting next to no eggs from my flock. So I came through and installed a roll-away floor in the nest blocks to see if I can get the eggs away from the chickens before they eat them. And it's worked out quite well. So I'm trying to show you how many eggs I'm getting at the moment. This is the next box, and thankfully I'm starting to get 5 eggs. I have been getting up to 7 eggs a day, which is excellent, and it looks like most of the chickens are starting to lay, and also I'm not seeing any eggs being eaten. Biggest problem I'm having at the moment is trying to keep the eggs clean, but the rubbish from the run is coming in here, and the eggs are rolling in it. Not hard enough to clean, but it's just it's a pain. I'd rather not wash the eggs, but sometimes you have to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come through and clean this floor and try to see if I can find a better solution to put some sort of edge across there so that the chickens don't bring the rubbish in. But happy in this market, especially when we've got scarcity of eggs in the shops, it's good to be able to have your own flock at home, finally laying some eggs and not being freeloaders. So I'll take these inside, give them a wash and store them on the bench. Thanks a lot everyone for joining me in this video. I really appreciate all the support, and I hope to see you in the next one.